Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to a new episode of One Mic where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about the highly anticipated Zack Snyder's Justice League, or as you probably know it, the Snyder Cut. So, in preparation for the release of the Snyder Cut, I watched the theatrical version of the Justice League yesterday, actually. It's a happy coincidence that I was able to actually view the Snyder Cut the following day, which was today. But I was watching it in preparation for Thursday, Friday, something like that, where I would maybe watch the whole thing in one sitting, maybe spread it out throughout a day, split it up between days. I heard it was split into 6 parts, which it is. Well, it's not split. It's in 6 parts. They have title cards that are just inserted at random points through the movie. I wouldn't call them 6 parts because they don't function as standalone stories. Like you couldn't release this as in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and have like each part be satisfying in and of itself. It wouldn't work that way. So it's not 6 parts. It's just Zack Snyder inserting title cards for whatever the fuck reason. There's a lot of things that Zack Snyder does that I often wonder why would you do these things? And I think a good example right off the top is this entire film is in the 1:33 aspect ratio. So essentially think of it as like a box. Like if watching this YouTube video, imagine if there were black rectangles on each side of the screen, as opposed to like the widescreen format that you might be accustomed to if you're watching like a Blu-ray of a theatrical film, where the black bars are at the top and the bottom. So essentially the viewing screen is like a square. I don't know why he did that. I mean, I actually read an article that essentially him saying like, I thought it'd be pretty fucking cool, so I did it. Like that was the gist of what he was saying, and it kind of just felt like Zack Snyder doing shit just to do it. I feel like it's one of those things where you do something just to do it, and I talk about this a lot. If you could find, I don't know, any place where I might have talked about Westworld. I felt like Westworld was confusing for the sake of confusing, particularly in season 2. Season 1 was fine. Season 3 was pretty good. It was okay. But season 2, I felt like it was up its own ass too much. It was confusing for the sake of confusing and not for a purpose. And I feel like Zack Snyder does that sometimes. Like he'll do something just to do it, as opposed to doing it for a reason. And I feel like that square aspect ratio was one of those things where he's like, I just want to do something different, so I'm going to fucking do this thing. But I digress. So let me talk about the movie. I'm going to talk about the movie itself, but I'm also going to talk about it relative to the theatrical release. So upon rewatching the theatrical release, one of the problems I had with it was it felt like you were dropped down into the middle of a movie where you missed the beginning or something like that. You have a superhero super team, and we've already seen Marvel do this successfully, right? They had, well, I don't want to say 10 years or whatever, because we're not building up to Infinity War and Endgame, but they had, well, I think about 4 years from Iron Man until the first Avengers movie. And they gave, each person in that group their own movie, aside from Black Widow and Hawkeye. And that helped you to be able to dive into the Avengers film. You didn't need to learn about Thor. You didn't need to learn about Iron Man. You'd already seen at least one movie about each of them. So it's easier to thrust your viewer into a story when the characters have already been established at an earlier date. Part of the problem with the theatrical release of Justice League is that we had only seen Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman prior to this film. And the Wonder Woman film came out 4 or 5 months prior to Justice League. So, that was still kind of fresh in our minds, right? We had nothing on Cyborg. We had nothing on The Flash. We had nothing on Steppenwolf. Whereas, even with Avengers, they planted the Thanos seed. I'm shifting gears here a little bit. They planted the Thanos seed at the end of the first film. So like by the time Thanos is introduced in the in Infinity War, we're already we've already heard his name. We're already accustomed. We've already seen him, and he already has a reputation. We don't have that with Steppenwolf. So and even with the first Avengers film, the main villain was Loki. We'd already seen Loki in the Thor film. So there was a lot of legwork to do with the original Justice League theatrical cut, and they did no parts of this. They didn't give me an indication. They didn't really tell me who Cyborg was. They didn't give me any real backstory on him, or give me something that, something to make me care about this character. They failed to do this with Barry. They failed to do this with Steppenwolf. And I think this film hurt for that, because when you have like these team up films, again, if you want to dive right into the story, we need to know about these characters already. And we also need something with some substance and some base to where we can build upon that. Whereas this kind of just throws you in there and it's like, all right, well, let's get to it. And there's so many things we need that we don't get. And it feels very rushed. It feels very spliced together. Like, we got these scenes, let's just toss them in, let's just toss them together, and I don't want to say in whatever order, but not in an ideal order. And it lacked a lot of world building that you need. You need that in film in general, but you really need it with these team up movies, right? So I was kind of taking notes while I was watching the theatrical cut, and one of the main things that I took away from it, that I wanted out of the Snyder cut, was that fleshing out of Barry, that fleshing out of Victor, that fleshing out of Steppenwolf, having like a time period in which we could see who these guys are, get their motivations together, and then see and kind of build them up as to why they would want to join this team. The Snyder cut does give us that. And I want to kind of start by saying that the Snyder cut adds in a lot of stuff that was necessary and that we needed, and that does improve upon the theatrical cut. I'm not going to spoil anything, but like give a couple, not concrete examples, but things that actually I will give a concrete example. Toward the end of the theatrical cut, Steppenwolf. Let me rewind a little bit. Steppenwolf's goal in the theatrical cut, no, in both films, is to acquire these 3 mother boxes. He takes the first from the Amazons fairly early in the film. He takes the second from the Atlanteans probably about midway. And then he gets the third from Man toward the end. We see him get it from the Amazonians. We see him get it from the Atlanteans. And he takes it from Man completely off screen. Like, it's during the scene where they're kind of like fighting with Superman after they brought him back from the dead, and he's not quite right in the head, so he's kind of battling them. And then this battle ends, and then all you see is like the teleportation light that we have seen with Steppenwolf earlier in the film. We just see that light, and then Wonder Woman says, like, he's got the last box. I'm like, this is the climax of the film. Like, he needs this third box. He gets this third box. You guys have told me he gets this third box. Everybody's fucked. And then he gets the third box off camera with no resistance. You don't even see him. You just see the light. It is like, okay, so the most important goal of his was achieved off camera. The Snyder Cut fixes that. The Snyder Cut shows him getting the box. It shows him meeting with resistance. So that's what I mean when I say it fills in a lot of plot holes and things that we needed to see in the theatrical cut that we don't see. And it gives us that. And I like that. It gives us this backstory. It teaches us more about Barry. It teaches us more about Victor. It shows us why Victor's so pissed off. It shows us why Barry is so, not why Barry is so antsy, but like, it just gives us a little bit more of Barry's kind of like weird, herky-jerky kind of quirkiness. I don't, and for the record, I don't particularly like this version of Barry Allen, but at least we we get to see more of him, as opposed to like in the theatrical cut. The first time we see him, it's when, well, we see him through the video footage of him getting this milk or whatever. But the first time we see him like in the film, like in universe, is when he's meeting with, when Batman's in his house or apartment or lair or whatever the fuck you want to call it, and he throws the batarang. Barry catches it. He says, I need somebody on my team. He's like, I'm in. So so we don't see Barry until that scene, and immediately he's in with no explanation other than I need friends. So like, we needed a little bit more of Barry Allen prior to him joining this team. So like, I appreciated getting more of that. What the Snyder Cut fails to do is make a bad movie good. What it essentially did was it made a bad movie less bad. It gave me a lot of the things that I wanted, and I when I say less bad, that still sounds like I'm saying it's shitty. I don't want to say it's shitty, because like, how can I say, the theatrical cut had flaws A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The Snyder Cut fixes those flaws, but it's still a bad movie. I can say that, and I am saying that, but but I don't want it to be as harsh as it sounds. The problem with this film as a whole, both the theatrical cut and the Snyder Cut, is that it has no heart. And when I say it has no heart, I don't really like the idea of this film is too dark, or and when I say too dark, I mean like thematically, like it's dark in themes, or it's dark in tone or vibe. People say that about the DC films versus the Marvel films, which are supposed, are totally fun and uplifting and shit. I don't know. I don't think that one is a positive and one is a negative. When I say that it's too dark and it lacks heart, it's too dark in a literal sense. Like, it's easier to notice how almost all this movie takes place in like a CG produced, overcast gray cloud world with lasers and demons and all kinds of, like, it's easier to notice that and harder to tolerate it when the movie's 4 fucking hours long. Like, and that's the problem, is that it doesn't improve upon the biggest issue with the film, which is that it's literally almost irritating to look at. Like, the entire time. There's no heart. You don't care about any of these characters. They barely try to make you, but like, I don't know. It was incredibly difficult to get through, because it was just like, I don't care about the characters. It's not visually appealing. And while they did give me a lot of the background information that I wanted on these characters, at the same time, it didn't make them sympathetic, I guess would be the best way to put it. It didn't make it so that I'm watching this like, oh, now I want to see, oh, if something happens, oh, that's terrible. Oh, what happened? It's like, I was kind of like just watching it, not really giving a shit. They did improve upon like some of the battle sequences. Like the battle sequences are extended, which I think is good. That's probably the only thing I think Zack Snyder does well, is making interesting battle sequences. But it also added in too much shit. Like, okay, like, give me that backstory. I feel like there is a good movie in here somewhere that exists in between the theatrical cut and the Snyder cut. He added in shit that I don't even know why it was there. And a lot of this is at the beginning, in like the first hour or so, where it's like, did I need this scene? You know what it feels like? It feels like, have you ever got like a DVD or a Blu-ray of a movie you love, and you see like it has 15 deleted scenes? You're like, okay, yes, please give me 15 more scenes of this movie I love. And then you watch the deleted scenes, you're like, I see why these were deleted, because these mean absolutely nothing. They're shit scenes. They have no tie-in whatsoever. I didn't need these scenes in this film. That's most of what, not most, but that's a lot of what got added to this, was stuff where I'm just kind of like, I don't need any of these things. Like, there's a scene where like, after Bruce is in whatever village this is to convince Arthur to join the team, Arthur, takes off his shirt, he goes in the water and he dips, and that's in both versions. But in the Snyder cut, after that, a group of women start singing, like almost like it almost sounds like a remorseful song, like they're sad to see him go. And I'm like, what's the purpose of adding this in? Like, I don't know. It felt so unnecessary. Like, and there's many scenes at the beginning that I'm just kind of like, why is this here? So it's one thing to add in things that we need to help flesh out the things that we missed, but he took it too far. He added a bunch of shit we didn't need. It feels like you could have chopped an hour off of this one and got probably about the perfect movie at about the 3 hour mark. So, yeah, at the end of the day, do I think uh, the Snyder cut improves upon the theatrical cut? Absolutely, absolutely. It gives a lot of things that we needed. Um, is it a good movie, and do I recommend it? No, it's still not a good movie. It it can be argued that it's worse because it's more difficult to get through. The 2 hour theatrical cut, while it is missing a lot of things that we need, it moves at a good pace. It's pretty action packed. It's simplistic. They're both simplistic, but like, for what it's worth, it's an easy watch. This is an incredibly difficult watch, incredibly difficult, because 4 hours is a long time, but then again, it's really not that interesting. Like when you strip away all of that background stuff and you give me here's our team forming, here's a couple battles, boom, in the movie. You're missing a lot of stuff, but you get all the shit you need. Whereas this gives you so much filler where it's like you only need a certain portion of it, and now you're slogging through like all this extra shit that you don't need. And it's just like, man, this was tough to get through. I would never recommend this movie to anybody because it's not worth. It's the juice isn't worth the squeeze. You think of like the Lord of the Rings films, something like that, or Endgame, something that's around that 3 hour mark, even as long as 3.5. And I think Return of the King extended cut is 4 hours. I would recommend any of those films because to me they're worth it. They're enjoyable. They keep your attention. It's like a saga almost. Whereas this just felt like one long, boring, dark movie. And man, it was not entertaining. But there are a couple more things that I like that I want to talk about. So I got some notes over here. I'm just going to read a couple of things that I like. So I wrote it as like, okay, here's the things about the theatrical cut. Here's the things about the Snyder cut that I liked. Here's the things about the Snyder cut I didn't like. So some of the things that I did like, I mentioned that it built out the characters more and that it built on their history. I mentioned that it filled in a lot of plot holes from the theatrical cut. And it better explained things that were sloppy, like what I mentioned about Steppenwolf making off with this final mother box. It did some interesting things too. So they upgraded Steppenwolf's entire appearance. He looks cooler. And then there's a portion of the film that, again, I'm not here to spoil, but there's a portion of the film where they entirely swap out Steppenwolf for Darkseid, which I thought was kind of cool. So they did that. Darkseid has a fairly strong presence in this film, actually. We see Darkseid several times. There's some multiple F-bombs in this, which I thought was kind of cool. We get a few fan servicey guest appearances. Martian Manhunter shows up twice. We find out someone that we've been watching this whole time is the Atom, Atom Adam, not Adam Adam. And then there's an interesting scene at the end, and I want to talk about this ending, and this is probably the last thing I'm going to talk about. But I mentioned that there's 6 parts, 6 title screens, and then there's an epilogue. The epilogue is comprised of a couple of scenes that were at the end of the movie, the 2 post-credit scenes, and then 2 more scenes. I think it was 2 more. Yeah, 2 more scenes, I believe. One of those scenes, and I'm going to spoil this because it's kind of a spoiler, but it's kind of not. So don't feel like I'm ruining the movie for you in any kind of way. There's a scene at the end, which is the scene that we see in one of the trailers that has the Joker in it, Jared Leto's Joker. And essentially, through the dialogue that takes place in this scene, we can discern that either this scene is taking place in like an alternate universe, or this scene is taking place in the future. after some really shitty events have transpired. The grouping of the people in this scene, the Joker, Batman, Mira, Deathstroke, and Flash, they all seem to be working together, and Cyborg, they all seem to be working together. Any train of events that happens that puts that group together where they feel like they need to work together is interesting to me. I think like, okay, like they seem to be setting up a sequel that sounds really interesting, because like this Justice League movie is very by the books. Like this doesn't do anything risky. It doesn't do anything different. It's a very, there's an object that could end the world. We got to stop it. Very generic, right? But this concept of these grouping of heroes and villains working together, like that's something that interests me, right? They cut from the scene and fucking Bruce Wayne wakes up in bed like it was a fucking dream. And I'm like, you mean to tell me the most interesting thing about this movie was a dream sequence? Like, oh my God, it drove me mad. So that was one of the last things I want to talk about. I want to run through these cons to see if I forgot anything. So I mentioned that it was too long. I mentioned they added in weird shit that seemed unnecessary. I mentioned how dark it was. Superman's gone the whole movie, just like he is in the original one. But you feel it more here again too, because it's 4 hours long. So you don't see Superman for like the first 3, and then when he comes back to life, he shows up at the final battle late as shit because he was like picking daisies on the farm and shit. And I'm like, like, man, I've been watching this movie for 3 hours and you just bringing up Superman, and it's a Justice League movie. But anyway, let me see. So I mentioned that. I mentioned the 6 parts with the epilogue, with the title screens, which was, again, it was pointless. That he didn't need to do that. Yeah, actually, that's really all I have. So I mentioned that it's a moderate improvement. It's really not very enjoyable. It's an improvement, but a small one. Let's see. Technical issues with the theatrical cut got fixed, which I mentioned. Yeah, it's really just a bunch of like demons and monsters fighting at night, and even when it makes sense, it's really not that enjoyable. So at the end of the day, I don't know any world in which you could say a 4-hour Zack Snyder movie is worth watching, but I'm gonna say this 4-hour Zack Snyder movie is not worth watching. Surprise, surprise. It's worth watching if you really enjoy the theatrical cut and you want more, but I found it to be more of what I don't like. So it's like, it's just a longer, shitty movie. It's less shitty because he did fix a lot of things that were wrong with the theatrical cut, but in fixing those things, he created new problems, and it's just too long. It's a slog to get through. It's really not enjoyable. It's visually unappealing to me. Like, I mean, like, I know there's some people who probably will think it's dope, but like for me, just this this constant overcast kind of look that looks like a CG animated comic book, like trying to be Sin City but not quite getting there. And then he has the goddamn nerve to supposedly be putting out a version in black and white. Like, what is wrong with this man? But anyway, I can't recommend it. If you love the theatrical cut, sure, fucking check it out. But this is nowhere near worth 4 hours of your time. You will not get that time back. Go spend that time doing something else. You don't need to watch this movie. I'd probably give the original film probably like a D as a grade, and I'd give this one like a C- or a D+. Like it's marginally better, but at the end of the day, when you spend 4 hours watching something and you're not engaged, you're not interested, you don't care, there's no way, no matter how much sense it makes and no matter how much it improves upon the previous version by adding in things to help it make sense, at the end of the day, you spend 4 hours like that, you're not going to be satisfied. So there's no way I could recommend this film. So that's it for the Snyder Cut. It's been a long wait. It was not worth it. If you insist upon watching it, or if you watched it and you enjoyed it, feel free to tell me why. But other than that, that's all I got, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.